All right, so you've been asking us to dig into this whole North Korea-Russia thing, and honestly, when I first saw this, I was like, cats and cucumbers, what could these two possibly have in common? But then you start peeling back the layers, and it gets really interesting, especially with everything going on with Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, over the past year, we've really seen their partnership accelerate, I guess you could say.
Right, and there's a lot of concern globally about what this means for the U.S. and its allies, especially in East Asia.
Yeah, I mean, it's not every day that Kim Jong-un decides to dust off the old passport and hop on a plane, right?
Seriously, his last summit was way back in 2019.
Exactly. So when he made that trip over to Russia in September 2023, it definitely sent a signal that things are changing,
And now there's talk of Putin making a return visit to Pyongyang sometime soon.
which would be pretty significant,
That's
right?
right.
The last time a Russian president set foot in North Korea was back in 2000.
Wow, that's a long time. So we're talking more than just a friendly handshake here.
Right. This points to a real strategic shift.
And it's not just speculation either.
No, not at all. The U.S. intelligence community, and when we say that, we mean all 18 agencies with all their different specialties, they put out their 2024 threat assessment. And they're basically saying that Russia is offering North Korea a whole lot of support, all different kinds, diplomatic, economic, you name it.
So let's break this down. What exactly does North Korea get out of cozying up to Russia like this?
Well, for starters, much needed assistance. We're talking food exports, oil shipments, the essentials.
Okay, that makes sense. They need that stuff for sure.
And Russia's even helping them navigate their way back into the global financial system, which is a big deal.
Yeah, that'll open a lot of doors for them.
But here's where things get really interesting. There are a lot of whispers, a lot of chatter about potential military aid being added to the mix.
Military aid, like what kind of stuff are we talking about?
Think fighter jets, missiles, that sort of thing.
Wow, okay, so things are getting a bit more serious now. And what about those rumors about Russia helping North Korea with their satellite program?
Yeah, that's definitely something that's been floated around. Putin himself has hinted that Russia's open to supporting North Korea's satellite development. And beyond just the direct support, think about the financial gains North Korea could see from arms sales to Russia.
Oh, right. They could make a pretty penny off that, couldn't they?
Plus, they're most likely keeping a close eye on how their weapons are performing in Ukraine, gathering valuable intel for their own military programs.
So it seems like a win-win for both sides. But isn't it a bit odd, given that Russia's actually been the target of some pretty serious cyber attacks from North Korea?
You're right. It's a curious dynamic for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they're playing nice on one hand, but then there's this cyber conflict simmering beneath the surface. But even with that tension, Russia has some very pressing needs that North Korea is in a unique position to fulfill.
And those needs stem from the conflict in Ukraine.
Exactly, especially when it comes to Russia's just insatiable need for firepower.
Okay, because that war is chewing through ammunition like nobody's business.
It's incredible, right? Get this. Russia is firing at least 10,000 artillery shells every single day in Ukraine.
10,000 shells every day. Wow.
Yeah, and their own domestic production just can't keep up with that kind of demand.
So where does North Korea fit into all of this?
Ammunition. Pure and simple. Think of it like this. Since October of 2023, there have been over 10,000 shipping containers making their way from North Korea to Russia. Analysts estimate that those containers could hold something like 3 million, maybe even more, artillery rounds.
Oh, wow. So North Korea is basically keeping Russia's war machine running.
In a lot of ways, yeah. And it goes beyond just artillery. There are reports that Russia's actually firing North Korean ballistic missiles against Ukrainian targets.
Really? Like they're actually using them in the conflict.
Yeah, there's credible evidence to suggest that over 40 North Korean ballistic missiles have been launched by Russia in Ukraine since late December 2023. So it's a way for Russia to sustain its war effort, but it also helps them offset their let's just say, increasingly complicated relationship with the West. At least that's what the U.S. intelligence community is saying.
Which is interesting because this whole partnership represents a pretty dramatic shift in how Russia used to approach North Korea, right? I mean, back in the 2000s and 2010s, they were all about those UN Security Council sanctions.
Yeah, they were totally on board with trying to rein in North Korea's nuclear missile ambitions.
They even had a ban on selling arms to North Korea back then.
It's true. So to see them now openly embracing this partnership, it's quite a turnaround.
It really makes you wonder what prompted this change of heart. Like, what happened?
Well, it's a complicated puzzle, for sure, but one piece of it seems to be Russia's growing dissatisfaction with its relationship with the West. That tension has been building for a while, and the conflict in Ukraine seems to have really push things over the edge.
So they're basically saying, fine, you don't want to play ball. We'll find someone else who will.
You could say that. It's a way for them to explore new alliances, new partnerships, even with countries that were once considered off limits.
But they're also getting something very real out of this arrangement, right? They're getting the weapons and ammunition they desperately need to keep fighting in Ukraine.
Absolutely, and that's a key factor. Their military-industrial complex is struggling to keep up with demand, and North Korea has this massive stockpile of essentially surplus Soviet-era weaponry just waiting to be used.
So it's like a match made in, I don't know, a pretty volatile geopolitical climate.
That's one way to put it. But this whole situation raises a ton of questions, right? What are the long-term consequences of Russia getting so cozy with a country that's basically been labeled a rogue state by most of the world?
It's a bit unsettling, to say the least.
It is. And that's exactly what we need to dig into next. We need to understand how this partnership could affect the global balance of power and what it might mean for the future of international relations. Because this seemingly isolated partnership, it's actually a window into the broader shifts that are happening on the world stage right now.
It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's fascinating how Russia's actions are like totally the opposite of what they were doing just a few years ago.
It is kind of crazy, right? Like they were all in on those UN Security Council sanctions.
They were really trying to put the brakes on North Korea's nuclear program.
And those sanctions were serious business.
Oh, yeah. They banned selling arms to North Korea and even helping them with their ballistic missile program.
Even if it was for, like, peaceful space stuff.
Exactly. So what changed? Why the sudden about-face?
All right, what happened?
Well, it's hard to say exactly what caused it, but there's definitely been this, like, growing sense of frustration in Russia with the West, you know?
Oh, yeah, that tension's been brewing for a while.
And the whole Ukraine situation seems to have just, like, brought it to a head.
So you're saying Russia's little buddy-buddy act with North Korea is, like, partly because they're mad at the West?
Well, it's not that simple, right? It's not just them throwing a tantrum, but there's definitely an element of, you guys turned your backs on us, so we're going to find other friends.
And those friends happen to have a lot of weapons.
Yeah, which is convenient because Russia needs a lot of firepower for their war in Ukraine.
They're burning through ammo like crazy, right?
It's insane. Their domestic production just can't keep up,
So North Korea is their new arms dealer.
basically. Russia needs artillery shells, missiles, all that stuff. And North Korea's got tons of Soviet-era weapons just sitting around.
So it's a win-win for them, I guess.
In a way, yeah. But it's kind of scary when you think about the bigger picture, right?
Yeah. Where does this all lead? What happens next?
Well, one of the biggest worries is that this whole thing could make the Korean Peninsula even more unstable.
Because North Korea's already been acting pretty bold lately.
Oh, yeah, all those missile tests, military exercises, it's making everyone nervous.
And now they've got Russia backing them up.
Exactly. So there's a real fear that North Korea might do something reckless, you know.
Something that could spark a bigger conflict.
And that could easily drag in the U.S., South Korea, Japan.
Yikes. Not good.
Not good at all. And then there's the question of, like, what message does this send to other countries?
Right. Like if Russia can just ignore UN sanctions and give weapons to North Korea, what's stopping anyone else from doing the same thing?
Exactly. It could set a really dangerous precedent.
It could completely undermine the whole international system.
We could see more countries getting their hands on nukes, more regional conflicts popping up.
And just a general sense of, like, chaos.
It's not a pretty picture. So is there anything we can do about it?
I mean, can we even stop this train?
It's tough, but I don't think we should just give up. The international community needs to show a united front, make it clear that this behavior is not okay.
So, more sanctions against Russia.
Maybe, but sanctions aren't a magic bullet. I mean, Russia's already under a lot of sanctions, and they're still doing this.
So what else can we do?
Well, we could try targeting specific people and companies involved in these arms deals, hitting them where it hurts.
And maybe try to isolate Russia and North Korea diplomatically, make them international pariahs.
Exactly. But then there's the question of North Korea. They seem to be getting away with this pretty easily.
Yeah, like they're reaping all the benefits without any consequences.
It's frustrating, I know. But they've been playing this game for decades. They're good at it.
So how do we deal with them?
Well, we could try squeezing them economically even harder, make it more difficult for them to smuggle weapons and other stuff.
Basically cut off their supply lines.
Right. Make it more expensive for them to keep doing what they're doing.
But won't that just make them more desperate, more unpredictable?
There's always a risk of that, yeah. But letting them build up their weapons without pushing back is even riskier.
Right. It's a tough situation, no easy answers.
It really is. So what should people be watching for going forward?
Like, what are the signs that things are getting better or worse?
I think the biggest thing is to just stay informed about what's happening in the region. Watch for any big moves from North Korea, like missile tests, and keep an eye on Russian military activity near the Korean peninsula.
And pay attention to what the US, China, South Korea, and Japan are saying and doing.
Exactly, because those are the key players in this whole drama.
This is a lot to take in. It feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
We are. This is a super complicated issue with a lot of moving parts.
But it's important to keep talking about it, right?
Absolutely. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the future. What are some possible scenarios that could play out? And what does it all mean for the U.S. and its allies?
Okay, so we've been talking about this whole North Korea and Russia thing, an alliance that's definitely raising some eyebrows.
Yeah, it's been quite the deep dive, hasn't it? But like we said, it's a lot more complicated than it might seem at first glance.
Right, so let's think about the future for a minute. What are some of the ways this could all play out? And what might it mean for the U.S. and its allies?
Well, it's always tricky trying to predict what's going to happen in international relations. So many moving parts.
Like trying to predict the weather, right?
Exactly. But we can look at what we know and kind of game out some possibilities. One scenario is that this whole partnership just keeps getting stronger.
Like they become best buds.
Well, maybe not best buds, but definitely closer. With more military and economic cooperation. Imagine Russia helping North Korea modernize their military, maybe even sharing some of their more advanced tech.
Okay, that's a little scary. A high-tech North Korea with Russia backing them up, that doesn't sound good.
It's definitely a concern. I mean, if North Korea feels more confident and capable, especially with Russia in their corner, they might get even more assertive, more unpredictable.
And that could be a real problem for the U.S. and its allies in the region.
Absolutely. It could even lead to some kind of conflict that pulls in other major players.
So that's one possibility. This partnership gets even stronger. But is there any chance it could fall apart? Like, what could cause a breakup?
It's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, this alliance is based on a lot of needs and opportunities on both sides. If things change, say the war in Ukraine ends or Russia finds other ways to get what they need, they might not need North Korea so much anymore.
So Russia might just ditch them if it's no longer convenient.
Countries tend to look out for themselves, right?
Hmm.
Alliances can change pretty quickly when the situation changes.
Hmm.
And let's not forget that Russia's flip-flopped on North Korea before, sometimes supporting sanctions, sometimes making secret deals.
So their current love fest might not last forever.
You never know with these things. But even if their relationship changes, it's clear that this whole thing has been a game changer for the U.S. and its allies in the region.
Yeah, how so?
Well, for starters, it makes it way harder for the U.S. to try and get North Korea to give up their nukes.
And it probably increases the chances of, like, an accidental war or something.
The risk of miscalculation is definitely higher now.
And it just adds another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation, right? Especially with China also vying for influence in the region.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the U.S. is playing 3D chess now, trying to deal with China and this whole Russia-North Korea thing at the same time.
So what can the U.S. even do about it?
They're already doing some things, like putting sanctions on people and companies involved in these arms deals.
And they're working more closely with South Korea and Japan on defense stuff, right?
Exactly. But it's a delicate balance. They want to send a strong message to Russia and North Korea, but they don't want to provoke anything either.
So lots of behind-the-scenes maneuvering.
Lots of diplomacy, lots of strategizing.
Mm-hmm.
But what about us, the average folks? What should we be paying attention to?
Yeah, how can we keep up with all this?
I think the most important thing is to just stay informed about what's happening in the region. Keep an eye out for news about North Korean missile tests, any Russian military activity near Korea.
And watch what the big players are doing. The U.S., China, South Korea, Japan.
Yeah, any statements they make, any actions they take, those can tell us a lot about how this whole situation is developing.
It's a reminder that even things happening far away can affect us all.
It really is. This whole partnership shows just how connected the world is.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of unpacking this whole thing. What started out as this kind of strange pairing has turned into a pretty serious situation with some potentially big consequences.
We've looked at why Russia and North Korea are doing this, what the risks are, and what it could all mean for the future.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating deep dive, and a little scary at times.
I think the biggest takeaway is that we live in a world where things can change really quickly. Alliances can shift, and events can take unexpected turns.
So we need to stay informed, think critically, and talk about these issues.
Exactly, because understanding what's happening in the world helps us make sense of things and make better decisions.
Well said. And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep learning about this. Think about the different scenarios we talked about and how they might affect your own lives.
These are the questions we all need to be asking ourselves as we navigate this crazy world.
Great discussion. Thanks for breaking it all down for us.
My pleasure. Always happy to chat.
All right, that's it for this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring